All right, Chris Hall here for Dogs on Demand on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and all those other places where you can find our program. And today we're happy to have Brooks Austin with us. He's Director of Recruiting for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, lead editor of Dogs Daily at Fan Nation. And the rumor is he's going to be in the next swimsuit edition of Sports Illustrated. Is that right, Brooks? Is that on the table?
Man, if I had a nickel for that joke, I'm telling you.
I know. I'm sorry,
dude. No, it's funny. It's like the only. It's like one of the very few things people associate Sports Illustrated with nowadays, other than whatever's in the news, I guess, with sports. But yeah, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit is like the number one thing I get asked about. Like not hey, is Georgia going to win this weekend, or what do you think about the quarterback battle? It's almost always, are you in the swimsuit edition, or some type of joke about it? So yeah,
I know. Well, listen, I'm glad that I lived up to expectations. Then, all right. Well, Brooks, it's good to have you on our program today, and of course, you're really in touch, in tune with what's happening in college football, especially around the University of Georgia and what's going on with the Bulldogs. So here we go. Let me start off with this question. All right, give me your best shot. Give me your best guess at the chances that the UGA will win a third national championship in a row. I get asked that question all the time. People say, is it possible? Can it happen? Well, certainly it can happen. It happened once and twice. Could it happen a third time? What do you think?
I mean, I think they're a more bettable favorite this year than they were last year to repeat, if that makes sense. I thought they had more of a, like, dang, man, how are they going to overcome all that, turnover last year? I thought that was much more of a discussion last year than this year. This year, it's more about like, hey, can they find a vocal leader on the defense? Is the quarterback going to be what we all think he kind of is? And based off what he's practiced like for the last 3 years, those are kind of the only questions, not necessarily like, hey, how do you replace 15 guys? How do you replace 10 guys on that defense that were really, really great football players from that 21 to 22 season? So if you would ask me to put a percentage on it, they're the betting favorite. They weren't last year. I think last year it was they were the third highest betting odds favorite behind Ohio State and Alabama. So we all know how it kind of turned out towards the end of the season. But this year, given the schedule, they should be the favorites to at least be in that discussion come January. And really, that's all you can ask is to have a puncher's chance now that there's still 4 college football playoff teams, not 12. Once there's 12, man, this discussion is very, very moot. This discussion is, well, we'll talk to you in January because we know that's where Georgia's going to be.
Yeah. It's so many changes have happened and are happening in college football. I'm kind of an old school traditionalist. I kind of like, the polls saying, okay, this is who's going to play for the national championship. Not the best system. I know it's not the best system. A playoff system is the best system. We have 4 teams. Should we have gone to 12, or did 8 make more sense? What do you think?
So I prefer the 4 for this very reason. I think college football has been special and is special, and it's going to continue to be special, but it's going to lose a bit of that for me because college football is like nerves tight every single weekend. Oh, crap, Georgia's only up 7, fourth quarter, midway through the season. They have to win this game. They have to remain perfect, or else they're not going to make the college football playoff. Or we're not going to have that kind of do or die moment. We're not going to have those Tennessee, South Carolina upsets mean that much more. It's just going to be, oh, well, Tennessee's got 2 losses now. They'll be ranked 9th instead of ranked 5th entering the college football playoff, or they'll be ranked 10th instead of ranked 3rd entering the college football playoff. So I think you take away some of the week-to-week meaningfulness, which is, in my opinion, and I think you could probably agree, and I think most people will agree to this, the greatest part about college football to me is when I'm sitting in the box on Saturday and I'm watching Georgia, beat the brains out of UT Martin, and then I look at my ticker on the bottom, my score sheet, and I go, oh dang, Clemson's about to get upset. I better go run over there and watch that football game. That type of sudden change in the landscape of college football, and ultimately the end goal, the final outcome, that kind of impact, the week-to-week impact, I think we kind of lose that when we go from 4 to 12.
Yeah, and I think, there's some positives with it. After the conference championship games, you're going to have some meaningful games, as the playoffs happen and that kind of thing. Is money all behind it? Is that what it's all about? Is money behind the expansion of the playoffs?
Yeah, I think there's rumors that the TV contract for the college football playoff might reach $1 billion. Wow. So Yeah, nah, it's the reason all of this is happening in college football. It's the reason realignment's happening in college football. It's the reason, things like the college football playoff going from 4 to 12. And it was inevitable, to be honest with you. Once they saw once they got a little bit of taste of it with the college football playoff and saw 4 teams result in how much money, and we only have to produce how many more football games. And, we spend the entire December talking about it too on all of our networking partners. So yeah, once they got a taste of it, it was inevitable. We were going to 12 or we were going to 8. I just hope they have a hard line on this. I hope they have a cap on this, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know when the last time I watched a college basketball game was. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, we'll see you in March. I don't have to watch your sport. I'll watch your sport in March for 3 weeks.
Yeah. Well, let's don't go to 64 teams. I mean, is the expanded playoffs, is that going to destroy the bowl system, the bowl games we have, or will it enhance it? As some of these games might be played in the bowls. What do you think?
So you'll make 8, or what is that? That's 4 more bowl games, right? Because you're going from 4 to 12. So you'll have 4 more bowl games in the initial round of playoffs. You'll make those games more important. But we saw what the college football playoff, just having those games mean the most. We saw what that did to the increased number of opt-outs and even teams opting out of bowl season nowadays in college football. So to be honest with you, bowl season exists for two or three reasons. One, people love football. Don't get it twisted. Like when football's on television, Americans watch that. The history has shown that over the years. 2, Americans love gambling on football. Like that's really, really important nowadays. Yeah. And 3, TV networks need live rights programming. They need stuff to put on their airways that isn't Skip Bayless yelling at the guy across from the table from them. So bowl games are important for a lot of reasons, and they won't go anywhere for those reasons. But hey, how much guys actually care about them, I think those are kind of by the wayside. They kind of have been for years, In my opinion, it's been since we started seeing major guys opt out of them to forego NFL draft opportunities. That kind of was the initial, hey, watch out, alarms. Things might start happening with your bowl games. And then once the college football playoff expanded, it was like, all right, these really don't mean anything other than they're an additional spring game for a lot of teams.
Yeah, and when you watch a bowl game and the stadium's half empty or even more than that, it's it gets a little down. All right, let's talk a little bit about Georgia. So I want to play Gloomy Gus with you now. If I'm a Georgia fan, more than anything else, this should concern me about the upcoming season. What would you say about that? What is that thing that should concern me most about the upcoming season?
2 things. 1, back-to-back weeks, Ole Miss, Tennessee. It's like your 2, in my opinion, your 2 toughest matchups, and they're November 11th, November 18th, right behind one another. One team runs the football really, really well, and Ole Miss has the opportunity to come into Athens and kind of play outside of their, head and over their head, if you will, play a little bit arrogant, play a little bit confident. Lane Kiffin typically has an ability to do that once or twice a year. And then you go the weekend after that to Tennessee and to Knoxville. So I think those kind of back-to-back weeks are something. And, outside of that, remaining healthy, I think that's the thing. But the biggest concern to me when I look at the roster, and I think Kirby kind of hit on this week during his presser, or maybe it was last week. I don't know when was the last time we got him. But he talks about interior defensive line depth. Nazir Stackhouse, they believe, is a great football player. I think he's a great football player. He's played really, really well the last 2 seasons at that nose tackle position. But outside of that, we're like, hey, Warren Brinson, first time we need you to go out and be a starter. Are you going to be a guy like Devontae Wyatt was? Are you going to be a guy like Jalen Carter was? Or are you going to be, 80% of that? And if you are 80% of that, where do we pick up the other 20%? Does that make sense? That's my biggest concern right now on the roster. Outside of that, it's, you're as talented or more talented than anybody else at any position across the board. And you're far more talented at 2 critical positions, defensive back and offensive line. I think you have the one of the best defensive back units in the country, and I would stand on Georgia being the best offensive line unit in the country.
Yeah, and a lot of folks ask me about the quarterback position. Stetson Bennett. I think you're going to be in the movie when they make the Stetson Bennett movie. You could have a part in that.
Maybe.
You get a new haircut. You might cut it as Stetson. I don't know, but what an amazing story Stetson Bennett was. But that era is past now. And he's in the pros. So you have Carson Beck, apparently the heir apparent, but nothing definitive has been stated about that as the starting quarterback for Georgia. So you got Carson Beck, you got Brock Vandagriff, and you got Gunnar Stockton in the quarterback room. A lot of people ask me, okay, what about Carson? And my answer, and just see if my answer is correct. My answer is, he's got all the physical ability. He's got a rocket for an arm. He's a talented quarterback. I think he probably moves better than what people give him credit for. He's got all the physical tools to be a top tier quarterback in college football. I'm wondering if he has the intangibles that Stetson Bennett had. Stetson had the kid he could motivate that team and rise up to the occasion, almost like nobody I've ever seen before in these big games, and provide that leadership. You're closer to that. I'm impressed with Carson. I'm impressed with his ability. Does he have that leadership ability, you think, that can take Georgia to where Georgia wants to go again?
So I'm going to steal a scouting term from a buddy of mine that I was talking to last night, kind of about this subject. I think what you're talking about is Stetson's ability to overcome short-term adversity, like sudden changes in a game. Oh, crap, we have a random fumble, a ball pop out of our hands against Alabama in the national title game. We find a way to overcome that really short-term adversity. It happened right now.
Yeah.
We don't know that about Carson Beck because he hasn't had the opportunity. But what we do know about Carson Beck is he's sure as heck overcome long-term adversity, right? The ability to say, hey, I didn't get my shot in 2021 when JT Daniels went down, despite the fact that I was the number 2. Okay, that's okay. We're going to keep working because obviously if I wasn't good enough to get my shot now, then that just means I wasn't good enough. I need to go somewhere else, right? So he keeps working, waits the 30 games that Stetson Bennett starts, and now it's his opportunity to provide proof of concept that he can overcome short-term adversity. I heard the stat, this was a while ago, I think it was Connor Riley that gave this out. Carson Beck is the only member of the 2020 signing class, only quarterback in the 2020 signing class, to still be at the school he signed at without having made a career start. Okay, so think about that. If the player hadn't started by now, every other kid in America, every other quarterback that signed in Division I football has either transferred or is the starter at that school. Wow. Carson Beck is the only one. So we know he can overcome long-term adversity. It's about, hey, you just threw a pick. We're only up 7. We're on the road. Joe Milton's got the ball, and he's about to throw for 4,000 yards and eclipse that mark this year. He's really good. How do you respond? We don't know that because how could we? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and listen, I've on my short list of Heisman Trophy favorites, I got Carson Beck. I mean, I have great confidence in Carson, but here's what I want to see. I want to see what, as Stetson did the phone call thing to the Tennessee fans. I want to see that from Carson. I want to see that moxie. I want to see that confidence.
I will say this. I don't think that's who this kid is.
That's not who he is. That's not.
This kid is like, he's cool. He's not like no highs, no lows. He's very. Have you ever been around Glenn Schumann? Have you ever heard Glenn Schumann talk? Yeah. Very similar to Carson Beck. Like has no ups, has no downs. Someone said it to me the other day. He has very low blood pressure. He's always got low blood pressure. He is never like, you would never see him be emphatic, doing something like this. He wouldn't be like talking with his hands. He's just kind of like, no, I like football. I like football.
Yeah. Hey, and that may certainly be in his favor as we get into the season. Of course, it doesn't hurt. I hate to disparage any team, but it doesn't hurt that he starts with UT Martin and Ball State, in the first 2 games. I mean, that's got to be an advantage, right? And Georgia shouldn't struggle against those teams, and he should be able to kind of snuggle into the quarterback position with those 2 games, don't you think?
Yeah, 3 of the first 4 games are against Ball State, UAB, and UT Martin, and home against South Carolina. I think in a road game to Norman at night would have been pretty tough to figure out week 2 of the college football playoff or the college football season as a first-year starter. But that game got nixed by the SEC, obviously. So we're not going to have to watch that. We're going to watch Georgia, even the South Carolina game. I mean, from a front 7 perspective, South Carolina is another like 2 or 3 years recruiting under Beamer from being ready to not have to rely on a bunch of turnovers to beat a football team like Georgia, if that makes sense. Like, if you're going to stand up, like, you got to have really, really good front seven play. I think you've even heard Shane Beamer talk about that in years past. So it'll be interesting to see, like, how they get warmed up, because not even just at quarterback, like they got a corner battle that they haven't really solidified yet. They got a left tackle battle that they haven't really solidified yet. We already talked about the questions on the interior defensive line. Smile Mondon, are you going to be fully healthy? Hey, Xavier Sorey, go get some run while he's not quite back yet. So there's a lot of opportunity to experiment and to grow in that first, portion of the schedule for sure.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting. Of course, you're very plugged in to recruiting for the University of Georgia. Right now, most of the recruiting services has Georgia with the #1 recruiting class for 2024. Georgia was lost to Target last week, and then we had a guy flip to Alabama and all this. And Georgia fans are so finicky; they get really up in arms when stuff like that happens, and then they want to burn down the city when a target from the University of Georgia goes somewhere else and not to Georgia. So talk to me about this recruiting class for 2024. Is Georgia going to maintain that top spot as far as the rankings are concerned? And give me your impression of this class.
So I think they have the #1 overall class right now, and there's still guys like Williams Winery that haven't made their decision. I think they're holding room for a guy like maybe Aiden Breland, who's a top 50 player, and LJ McCray down there in Florida, who I'm pretty sure LJ McCray, if he's not the best defensive end in the country, he's pretty daggum close. The evaluators will get another chance to see him this fall. I've been told that kid's like 6'6", 280 now. Wow. Like, he's really, really big. They think he might be the next like Trayvon Walker type football player, Michael Williams type football player. Not saying that they feel like they're going to land him. It's a really, really long way to go. But they still have room. They're ranked #1 overall right now, and they got a really high rating and all that, and they still got room to add like really special players in this class, despite, like you mentioned, some of the misses as of late with guys like KJ Bolden and Peyton Woodyard flipping to Alabama. The Peyton Woodyard, to Alabama thing, I said this on our show last night. Georgia is a very unique place that all their recruits get over recruited. Guys are always other programs are always trying to pick them apart and get them to come play for them instead of play for Georgia. And it's a lot of counter recruiting tactics. And just because you were committed to Georgia doesn't mean teams stop calling you. Georgia might stop calling you if you're committed, but just because you're committed to Georgia doesn't mean teams are going to stop calling you. And I don't know if this was one that Georgia was like, hey, let's make sure Peyton Woodyard doesn't flip on us. Let's make sure we're showing him extra love. Let's make sure whatever counter recruiting tactics Alabama's using, let's make sure we're countering back, things like that. It didn't feel like an all hands on deck approach to me. So I'm not saying they let that one happen, but whatever. So Jalen Hayward, the other safety that decommitted and is now, guys, he committed to UCF. So if you think guys are decommitting from Georgia to go to UCF, well, I can't really explain recruiting to you.
Yeah,
and then the KJ Bolden one, that is a miss, 100% a miss. They wanted that kid bad. Florida State did a great job, recruited him and landed him. So I think sometimes you just see, hey, 4-star decommitted from Georgia and went elsewhere, and you immediately think of, Georgia must have been dying today. They must be pissed off in the room, in the meeting rooms. Not necessarily all the time.
Yeah, I think about these kids that Georgia goes after, and they look at that roster and they look at all the guys that have already been recruited. And, if you don't have a great deal of confidence in yourself and your ability, you might say, if I go to Georgia, I may not be on the field for 2 or 3 years, and I really would love to play. And if you're not really confident in your ability, I think, to compete with these guys, it may be a detriment, don't you think? Is that true? Is that a reality?
Listen to this. I wrote this down last night. David Daniel, Nyland Green, Dalen Everett, Julian Humphrey, Jonel Aguero, Justin Rhett, and A.J. Harris. That's 7 defensive backs on the roster right now at the University of Georgia that have at least 2 years of eligibility, some as much as 4, that were all top 200 players, like I said, in the country, and none of them have started a single game at the University of Georgia.
Wow.
7 guys. 7 guys in that room that were the greatest player at their high school, that were 4 and 5 stars, that right now are sitting at the University of Georgia fighting, scratch and claw, and trying to get onto the field. So, yeah, If that ain't used on the recruiting trail by schools like Florida State that need high-quality football players on their roster and in their depth chart, then they're probably not recruiting the way that they should be. You know what I mean? Like, if you're talking to a kid like KJ Bolden, you tell him the honest truth. Hey, Malachi Starks is great. He's got to play 2 more years there. They just signed Jonel Aguero. He's great. He's really, really good. Not saying you're not, but he's great. They only play 2 safeties. What are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like that should be used as a recruiting tactic from other programs for sure.
Yeah. I look over the recruits for 2024. I'm impressed with the offensive recruits, Rayoli, Puglisi, and all of those guys on the offensive line. But man, these guys on the offensive and defensive lines. Now, you played college football. I look at these guys. I look at the film of these offensive linemen and defensive linemen, these linebackers. The size of them coming out of high school. What in the world is their mama feeding them? And the speed that they show and that they have. Back in the day, I've been a college football, high school football fan for a long time. There's just something different about these kids these days. They're bigger, they're faster coming out of high school. It's almost like they're college ready. How does that happen?
So Georgia's prioritized it for sure. Georgia, like the first thing I talked to when I'm a director of recruiting for a reason. I see a lot of high school football players and a lot of coaches call me. And when Georgia coaches call me about players, or I'm talking to Georgia coaches about players, the number one thing I hear about skill guys is, well, what are the track times? Have you checked the track times? What are the track times? Because they want to know, like, it's verifiable speed. You can't lie. There's no lying a laser. You can't do it. So if I know that you go out and you're a sub 11 second 100-meter runner on the track, I know you're fast enough to play a skill position at the University of Georgia. They prioritize it. Malachi Starks, great track athlete. Okay, so when he goes and plays college football and you're like, dang, he just ran that dude down from Missouri. Well, they prioritize it, right? All their corners are sub 11 second runners. If you don't run sub 11 seconds in the 100, you will not play defensive back at Georgia, period, point blank. And then on the offensive side of the football, they've always prioritized size, but since Stacey Searles has taken over, they have really prioritized it. It has been, if you aren't 6'6 plus, I have a hard time recruiting you. A kid like Casey Poe. Casey Poe's a great football player, about 6'3 and a half, 305 pounds. He looks nothing like anybody that's even in the room and that's being recruited right now by Stacey Searles. He signed 6 guys. He signed 6 guys. Will sign 6 guys in this class that will average 6'6", 350 pounds. It's
unbelievable.
Blasphemous.
And these guys can move. I mean, it's not like they're sloths. I watched some film and I'm just, I'm amazed. We're located in South Georgia. It's a hotbed for high school football. And, you go to these high school football games and you see these linemen lumber out on the field, before the game to do the pregame, warm-ups and that kind of thing. And then when the whistle starts and the game starts, it is amazing to me. You see these big guys running down the running backs, and I tell you, college football is high school football feeding into college is something. Well, listen, I got some teams that I say are most probably going to make the playoffs. And so if you make the playoffs, you can eventually win the national championships. I'm going to give you my teams and see what you think about my list, and maybe you want to add or take away something. I got Georgia, obviously. I got Michigan. Now, these are teams I think can make the playoffs in 2023. Georgia, Michigan. I got Florida State in there. I got Ohio State, USC, Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, Penn State, Washington, Clemson, and Oregon. Those are the teams that I think out of those teams, 4 of those teams are going to make the playoffs. So what do you think about that?
So I think it was 11 teams that you named. Florida State, really tough schedule. Got to play LSU and the ACC slate. Got Clemson, I believe, on the road. They play LSU and Clemson, I think, in the first 4 weeks. So we're going to kind of know about Florida State really, really early in this football season about what their national title contention is. I'm a big manage expectations type of guy. I think it's important that we don't add unnecessary expectations onto our football program with our mouth as football coaches. I learned that from Kirby Smart, by the way. Kirby Smart does not give any reason for anybody to think anything about his team. If you listen to him talk, he gives you nothing unless he wants to give you something, all right? He's not out here telling you before the 2020-21 season that he's going to have 15 guys drafted in the NFL draft, that he's going to break an NFL draft record, even though he knew he had a great football team. He's not going to say that, all right? But you know who is? Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh been telling everybody and their mama that Michigan is the most talented football team in college football this year. So they better win a national title, because he's told people he's going to have 20 guys drafted this year in the NFL draft. He's told people that he's going to have seven offensive linemen drafted this year in the NFL draft. That's how Jim Harbaugh is out here talking to people about his football team. So Michigan better make the playoff.
Is that a good strategy? I mean, should you do that as a coach?
I said this the other night, man. You don't have to be Nick Saban. You don't have to be Kirby Smart. You don't have to be Vince Lombardi. You don't have to be these people. But these people don't do that. Bill Belichick does not do that. Bill Belichick does not come out and say, you know who I think is going to be NFL Rookie of the Year? Mac Jones. I think he's great. He doesn't say that. He never says that. It's always on to Cincinnati. It's always baseline information. It's always, I don't know. We'll see if he's ready. You know what I mean? Like, you ask me if it's a good strategy. Some people will say, oh, he's just confident in his football team. We can be confident behind doors. We can tell our guys we're going to run through brick walls together and we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. You don't have to go tell the media every time you get an opportunity. So I don't know if it's a great tactic and a great strategy, but it's Jim Harbaugh. You know what I mean? Jim Harbaugh is very, very different human being. And his differences have led to a lot of great results. So it's kind of hard to question him, to be honest.
Yeah, and you know, when you talk like that, you put a lot of pressure on your team. You put a lot of pressure on yourself with your fans. You know, you better deliver, like you say. You better deliver. I'm we're 20-something days away from the beginning of the season. Man, I'm ready to go. It's been a long time since we've had college football. Just a couple of other things while we have you here. Okay, which is more likely? Let me give you a couple of these. Which is more likely? That UGA wins a third national championship in a row, or a big team breaks through for a national championship? Which of those two are more likely, you think?
So, like a random team breaks in and win a national title, or Georgia wins a third. So, would USC count as a random team here? Because USC hasn't won a title since what, 05?
Yeah.
So they would kind of count, right? If they count, I'm taking them, because I think they do have a good enough quarterback to defy all of the roster holes that they have. And by God, do they have a bunch.
Yeah. On the defensive side, don't you think? Yeah.
For sure. UFC, that's what I was about to say. They might have to score 55 a game to win.
but they can do that.
They can do that. Like, I study a lot of football. It's kind of what I do. It's what I'm passionate about. There are a few offenses in this world that I look at and go, like, what is how? How did he do that? How did he know to do that? Why is he calling that play? Why is that defense doing that against them all the time? Because they just, man, Lincoln Riley is a very special mind when it comes to offensive football. Yeah. He just don't know how to recruit a defender to save his butt, to be honest.
Yeah. And I've often thought, why don't he go get a defensive coordinator and say, look, go give me some players?
He's had great ones. He's had great ones. Alex Grinch was his defense coordinator at Oklahoma. Did a great job. It's just, I think it's a matter, like, when you're the head coach, you get to allocate the resources, especially on the recruiting trail, right? So Kirby Smart does a really good job of recruiting an entire class every year, right? Hey, go out, recruit 25, 20, 30 guys that we know can play at important positions for us across the board. Give me 5 offensive linemen. Go get 3 or 4 wide receivers. Get a tight end, maybe 2. Make sure we sign a quarterback. You know what I mean? It's very balanced, offense and defense. Make sure if we sign 13 defensive guys, make sure we sign 12 offensive guys. It's like really, really balanced, because your roster needs to be balanced. I don't think roster allocation is balanced out there under Lincoln Riley. It wasn't at Oklahoma, and it's certainly not been at USC.
Yeah. All right. Which is more likely? Alabama wins the SEC West, and the divisions are going away after this year. Alabama wins the SEC West, or LSU or Texas A&M does. Which is more likely?
So it's basically Alabama or the field. I think LSU is the most talented and most flawless team in the SEC West this year. I have a very, very, very hard time in 2023 going into a football season and saying, you can win a division title, you can go to a college football playoff if I don't know who your quarterback is or what your quarterback is. And that's exactly where we're at right now with Alabama. I do believe they have a great offensive line, but I am not one of these people that thinks you can win 12 or 11 football games in the SEC lining up saying, hey, we're going to punch you in the mouth today. It hasn't been done probably since Derrick Henry. I don't think a football team has done that in this conference since Derrick Henry. Georgia wasn't able to do it when they had Isaiah Wilson, Andrew Thomas, Ben Cleveland, Trey Hill, Solomon McKinley. They have 5 NFL football guys, barring some kind of stupid decision, on their offensive line, and they couldn't lean on people and stay perfect. So I find it a hard time to believe that that's the recipe for success. And I watched what LSU and Brian Kelly did last year. I thought Brian Kelly should have, had an opportunity to win Coach of the Year last year with the holes in that roster, winning an SEC West. I know they laid an egg against Tennessee at home, but that was a bad football team that played like a really good one last year out there at LSU.
Well, we'll see. That's what it's all about. Which is more likely, Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State wins the Big Ten, or somebody else?
Definitely the big three out there. I mean, Wisconsin's probably going to, because they're still playing divisions. Wisconsin, I think, is the team out of the West out there in the Big Ten, because the Big Ten West is still really, 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 really bad. It's like Wisconsin and 7 teams that would go 4-8 in the SEC. And then in terms of I have a hard time buying into the Penn State hype because I follow recruiting so well. You can't recruit like little brother, and I mean little brother. Like they recruit like South Carolina in comparison to what Georgia is and what Ohio State is and what Michigan is. Michigan and Ohio State recruited a top 5 level annually. Penn State does not do that. Penn State recruits at like a top 12 level annually, and it's really, really hard year over year to kind of summon up the strength to beat those 2 football teams enough to win the Big Ten. So I would take like an Ohio State there. I think this is the year they have an opportunity. Well, probably Michigan, because they have an actual quarterback that they know of.
Yeah, well, listen, in the Peach Bowl, was it a penalty or not?
Per the letter of the law, not a penalty.
Right.
And that's all that matters, right? The letter of the law. I think the letter of the law actually is forcible contact with the crown of the helmet. He did not. He made contact with the shoulder collar. And forcible contact to the head or the neck of a defenseless receiver. He did not. He made initial contact to the sternum of Marvin Harrison. It's the reason why replay exists. So we can actually apply what happened to the letter of the law. Because otherwise, why in the heck do we have a law? Why do we have a rule if we can't implement it to the actual lettering of how it was written?
When will Ryan Day quit talking about it?
I don't think that's Ryan's fault. I watched. I know it's.
I know.
Every time it's not their fault. They keep getting asked about it, but
I know.
I think at this point, if the roles were reversed, at this point, Kirby would make that reporter feel so damn nervous to ask that question that he just wouldn't ask it, because you knew what you were going to get, right? It would be I'm not talking about it, so quit asking. It would be very similar to that.
That's true. You've got him down pat. You've got him down pat. Yeah. All right. We're going to let you go, Brooks. Brooks also been with us here from Sports Illustrated. And just quickly, just one quick thing. What in the world is going on with college football and all these conference realignments? Are we through with that, and who's going to go to the Rose Bowl from the Pac-10 after this year? I mean, what's happening?
So the Rose Bowl will be the
Playoff.
Big Ten's championship game, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So they'll do the Big somehow the Big Ten's going to add, I think, 2 or 3 more teams, or slide 2 or 3 more teams out to the West and make them travel and be in a division essentially, or a pseudo division with those teams, so they're not traveling so far week in and week out. I don't know, man. I hate, and hate's a strong word, I hate that the sport that I love is being impacted this drastically, seemingly by the gust of a wind. It doesn't seem to me that the decision makers in college football are making these decisions with any type of foresight or deep thought process. It seems like they're just like, oh my God, we better go. And then they go. And then they jump into a conference, and now all of college football is realigned because what? The Pac-12's got a bad TV deal? Like, and it's wild to me, man. Honestly, like a sport and conference realignment is not new to college football. It's happened, right? And last time it happened was in 2013, and it happened to the SEC. So this is not new to college football. Like I said, just hate that the decision makers are doing this. Like the guy that sits at the corner of the street and is like, hey, what we doing tonight, boys? Well, I guess we're going to go to the bar down the street. And they just go do that tonight. And it's just because that's what they decided. I don't love that.
I don't like it either. All right. Brooks Austin's been with us from Sports Illustrated Fan Nation. Brooks, it's so great to have you on our program. I can talk to you a lot longer about college football, and we'll try to have you back soon. Thank you for being with us today, man.
Yeah, no doubt, brother. It's been fun.
All right. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.
See you.